Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Do you feel stuck, silent, and stressed? Is something hurting your heart and soul? Are you burning yourself out? If so, you are in the right place because this is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with inner peace and joy. Let's get started. Hey, last episode we started talking about the idea that we really need to understand that diversity is really critical aspect of what allows us to build and maintain healthy and thriving communities. And I was, making that point in part by, pointing out the, from the evolutionary perspective, the argument around why, again and again, research shows that the most healthy, thriving communities are the ones that have greater diversity. Now today, I want to continue to reflect on this idea with you, but from a different perspective. When I connected with my heart on this question, I said, heart, why, what's the value in being part of a diverse community? Why do we need it? Why do we need it? What's the problem if we are lacking diversity in our communities? And for my heart, it was said, the first thing is that without diversity, we can really strangle our creativity. And not only do we strangle our creativity, but in the process, we can really also strangle our sense of aliveness and our ability to have fun. Because being part of diverse community and being open to diversity of ideas and different ways of being and doing things and just engaging with life. My gosh, it's like variety, introduces amazing variety in your life. And variety is a spice of life. But another really interesting thing that my heart said was that we can actually limit our potential for healing if we are not open to diverse ways of being and thinking and feeling. We can actually limit our capacity for healing by not being open and appreciative of a diverse of diverse ways of thinking and being. It's like, well, interesting that you say that, right? I mean, that is not language that would have come out of my mind. That idea never entered into my mind that we can limit our potential for healing if you're lacking diversity, if you're not open to diverse ways of thinking and being. But then as I started to think about this idea, it's like it started to make a lot of sense. And I started to think about it in the context of my own experience, and I realized, wow, I mean, it's actually been one of the greatest blessings in my life, particularly when I think about, about it in the context of the healing process that I've been through. and what has allowed that healing process to occur for me. One of the greatest blessings in my life, and the greatest helpful factors that has allowed me to heal and grow in the ways that I have, is the diversity of opinions and thoughts and cultures and people that I've been exposed to over the course of my life. And I'll give you just one example of how it has functioned in my personal life, like in the context of my healing, my ability to heal from the trauma of being a survivor of child sexual abuse. So if you remember, I shared with you, actually I've shared with you many times, that one of my greatest fears was like, what if my family finds out? Like, what if my family finds out about, you know, what has happened in terms of my having been sexually abused, and what I was struggling with even at that point in time. I was like so afraid of the consequences. Like, I didn't think anything good could come out of my family finding out. I thought that either people wouldn't believe me, like my family members wouldn't believe me, because the person who abused me was a member of my extended family, and they were someone that everyone in my family loved and trusted, including myself, prior to that experience of their abusing me, right? And they continued, even in the aftermath of their abusing me, because I didn't tell anyone about what happened. This person continued to be loved and trusted by everyone in my family. So I thought it was like my word against his, and I was really, really afraid that, that my family members wouldn't believe me, because here's this grown up, this adult. He's loved, he's trusted, he acts like, like he's this great person, who, even when he acted, like in the way that he interacted with me in front of my other family members, it was like, oh yeah, I love Samia, and all that kind of stuff, and if I refuse to let him hug me or kiss me, or if I refuse to talk to him, which I did, in the aftermath of his having experienced his abusing me, it was like my family, the things I heard, my elders and even my cousins, and it was like, Samia, what's wrong with you? It's like, they thought I was being rude and just being spoiled. So I was really afraid that I wouldn't be believed, that my family members wouldn't believe me. And then the other thought was, look, even if they believe me, my fear was that even if they believe me, that they would still blame me and judge me, because I knew what happened to me, and I still blamed and judged myself. So it was a very natural thought and natural fear for me to have, that even if they believe me, they will still judge me and blame me, and I didn't think I could take that. So I went into a silence. Okay, now, when we think about, the healing process and what is required for us to be able to heal, I can tell you that if, as a survivor of any kind of abuse or trauma, you feel like you cannot talk about it, that that is not a good thing. That's not a good sign. If you feel like you cannot talk about it. See, there is a difference between choosing not to talk about it, knowing that you can choose not to talk about it, and choose who you talk to or not, and making that choice for yourself. But it's an entirely different thing if you think you cannot talk about it. And the reason that you think you cannot talk about it is because you have these kinds of fears that I did, right? There's a lot of blame and shame and guilt that are keeping you silent, that make you believe that you cannot talk about what you've experienced because it's just so shameful, because you feel that guilty, and so on and so forth with regards to it. That's not a good place to be. That's not healthy. Okay? So if you are in that place in your life, that's an indication that you need healing, like a lot of serious healing, and you're still very much, if you're stuck in the silence, then you are in the more earlier stages of the healing process than not. Meaning, like, you still have a long way to go. You still have a long way to go, right? So it was like, okay. Now the problem that I was dealing with is, I got to a point, at first I was just in total denial and just trying to run away from my memories of what had happened. I was just trying to forget about it and move on with my life as if nothing had happened, but it wasn't working. And over time, it got worse. And one of the things that really began to get to me was a sense of loneliness. Like, I felt so isolated. I felt so alone in what I was going through. Like, to the point where it was one of the primary thoughts and that led to my feelings of depression and sadness. And I remember, like, I wasn't like into crying a lot in general, but I remember there were a few times when I just like couldn't help myself burst into tears. And the vast majority of those occasions, the thoughts that were going in my head was that I couldn't take that sense of loneliness anymore. I felt so alone, so isolated. And I knew, it began to become more and more clear to me that I needed to tell someone. I needed to talk to someone about what had happened and get some help and support, because I'd done everything I could on my own to help myself. And I'd made some progress over the years, but I was stuck. I couldn't get any further ahead in my healing process without more help and support. And getting access to that greater degree of help and support required me to open up, to break the silence. Now, in the Indian Pakistani culture, and if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, that's my ethnic background. My mom's from Pakistan, my dad's from India. I've actually lived in both countries for a few years. We were also living in the Middle East, before we ended up in America. So I have actually moved around a lot. Now, I'll tell you, interestingly, when we were living in India, when we were living in Pakistan, we were living even in the Middle East, Asian cultures in general, of course, there's a lot of diversity within different cultures in Asia itself, but there are also some very strong similarities, right? And certainly in the context of our Indian-Pakistani culture, one of the biggest similarities, at least the way that I experienced our Indian-Pakistani culture and family life, was that, when you have a personal problem, you solve it within the family. And from everything that I knew at that time and everything that I saw and heard, I believed, and I could see and feel that something like sexual assault, sexual abuse, this was an issue that was not okay to be talked about in the open. It was a very, 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 very taboo issue. Okay? Now, it's taboo here in America too. But everything's relative, right? So if it's taboo in America, and if people in America have a hard time talking about it, my gosh, within the Indian-Pakistani culture, especially if you're living in the kind of joint family, relatively traditional family that I was growing up in, it was 10, 20, 100 times more taboo, right? And so it's just one more reason why I felt I could not, it was okay, so I need to talk to somebody. Can't talk to my family, but here's an issue, this problem I'm struggling with, and it's an issue that in our culture, the only place you have to go really to ask for help is within your family, because there are no outside resources that are easily accessible. I certainly didn't know of where I could go to get help outside of my family. And I couldn't tell my family. So it was stuck. So luckily for me, what happened is that my family ended up moving to America. In America, of course, a very different culture. Very, very different culture in so many different ways. So not only is it very much more normal and acceptable and expected that, especially in the context of if you're dealing with mental health issues, it's even expected that you're going to go seek help from a therapist, a counselor, a professional. And if you want to find a therapist, counselor, they're everywhere. Relatively speaking, you have a lot of access, and it's not strange. And there's laws about confidentiality, right? Where it's okay, I can go to a therapist, tell them about what I'm struggling with, what has happened, and I can feel confident that this will not get back to my family. This was actually really, really important to me, right? This is why, again, the amazing thing about, having access, it's wow, when I was in college, we actually had a student psychological services center, and they had therapists and counselors in the Student Psychological Services Center. Another point of access, really easy, confidentially. And as a student, I actually got, I could get up to 6 sessions of counseling for free. Another, my gosh, it's about access, right? And so this made it so easy for me to access this resource, this help. that it was like, wow, that I actually was able to do it, right? So if you remember, I've shared my story with you before, the very first person I ever told about my being a survivor of child sexual abuse was in fact a counselor in our Student Psychological Services Center on my college campus. You see? Now, if I had not moved to America, or even after moving to America, if I had not opened myself up to the possibility of doing things in different ways and allowing myself to open up my thinking, to consider different ways of being and acting, my options would continued. I would have continued to feel very, very constrained in my options. Who knows if I would ever have been able to open up to my family, and how many more years it might have taken me to get to that point where I felt safe enough or desperate enough to finally open up to my family and ask for the help and support. Now, the other thing is that if I had opened up to my family first, I don't know. What if they really hadn't believed me? What if they really hadn't, even if they did believe me, what if they really did blame me and judge me? How might that have impacted my ability to heal? This way, I explored a different option, looked into a different way of being and doing things. It was very foreign, for me and everyone in my family. But I opened myself up to that, and it allowed me to do things in a way that I was still really, really afraid to speak up, to break my silence, but I was able to manage that fear and act even in the face of that fear, because the options that opened up for me in America, in being a college student in America, they allowed me to reduce the risk of not being believed, of being rejected, blamed, and shamed when I first opened up about what I'd experienced. And I was able to learn skills and tools to help myself and learn better ways to communicate about these issues with the people in my life, so that when I was finally ready to tell my family, and I told my family, my gosh, it was actually, I don't know did I ever tell you guys the story of when I actually finally told my family? I may not have, but maybe one of these days I will. Because oh my gosh, it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing experience. And I'll tell you, I really do believe that if I didn't have the skills and the knowledge that I learned in the meanwhile, things could have gone very, very differently and very, very badly, as it was when I told my family. Things turned out very well. And I'm so grateful for that, right? And I was not only able to tell my family for my own sake, in terms of help, taking another critical step in my own healing process, but I was at a place in my life and in my healing process where I was actually able to help and support my family members in dealing with that news in much better ways. So it made everything so much more smoother and easier and happier, even in some ways. Because, you see, I had been exposed to different ways of doing things than I would have been able to know had I just stayed within my own cultural context. So think about that. Think about where you can open up more in your life and explore different ways of being and doing things that might allow you to explore new, better possibilities for helping yourself heal and move ahead in a better, faster, more efficient, effective way towards your own journey, in your own journey from survivor to thriver. And if this is something you find yourself struggling with, remember, you can reach out for help and support. And it can really help make life a lot easier for you to have that extra help and support. And I'm one person that you can reach out to. You know how to reach me. Just go to my website at www.academyofthriving.com. Click on the Contact Us page and you'll see how you can connect with me. So until next time, I wish you lots of peace and joy.